When rescuers finally reached Marty Meierotto's remote trapline hut after days of radio silence, what they discovered inside left even the toughest Alaskan trappers unable to speak. This changes everything. The temperature was 40 below zero. 3 days without contact. When the door creaked open, 2 veteran search and rescue specialists froze in their tracks. What they witnessed would haunt them forever. Before we reveal what happened in that frozen cabin, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story will shake you to your core. And stick around until the end. What Marty did next will leave you speechless. Marty Meierotto isn't just another reality TV personality. He's the real deal. A modern-day mountain man who spent over 2 decades surviving in Alaska's most brutal wilderness. His 150-mile trapline sits deep in the frozen interior, where temperatures plunge to 60 below zero, where grizzlies roam freely, and where one mistake means death. For years, Mountain Men fans watched Marty battle blizzards, stalk wolverines, and live months in complete isolation. He's the guy who built his own cabin with hand tools, who flies his own plane into places most pilots won't go, who thrives in conditions that would kill ordinary men within hours. This is a man who's face down, charging bears without flinching, who's survived whiteout blizzards that buried his cabin under 10 feet of snow, who's gone weeks without seeing another human soul. Marty represents something rare in our modern world, a person who's truly mastered the art of wilderness survival, not as a hobby or adventure sport, but as a way of life. His trapline isn't just a job, it's his identity, his purpose, his connection to something primal and real that most of us will never understand. But something happened out there. Something that would test even Marty's legendary resilience in ways no one could have imagined. Something that would prove that even the toughest among us have a breaking point. It started with a missed radio call. Marty always checked in with his wife Dominique every 3 days without fail. It was their lifeline, their connection across the frozen wasteland that separated them for months at a time. These weren't casual check-ins. They were survival protocols, carefully maintained routines that kept Dominique from worrying herself sick and kept Marty accountable to someone back in civilization. When that first call didn't come, Dominique felt her stomach tighten. She knew her husband better than anyone. Marty didn't make careless mistakes. He didn't forget important things. He was disciplined, methodical, almost obsessively careful about every detail of his wilderness life. One missed call became 2, then 3. With each passing day, the knot in Dominique's stomach grew tighter. She called other trappers in the area, asking if anyone had seen Marty or heard from him. Nothing. By day 4, alarm bells were ringing throughout the Alaskan trapping community. Alaska State Troopers mobilized their search and rescue units. Fellow trappers who knew Marty's routes started asking questions, checking maps, calculating how long it would take to reach his most remote camps. Bush pilots began preparing for a search mission, studying weather patterns and fuel requirements for flights into the deep interior. Everyone who knew Marty understood one thing. If he wasn't responding, something was seriously wrong. This wasn't a man who got lost or made rookie mistakes. If Marty Meierotto had gone silent, there was a reason, and that reason probably wasn't good. The rescue team assembled quickly. 2 experienced trappers who'd known Marty for years, a wildlife officer familiar with the territory, and a bush pilot with decades of experience, flying into Alaska's most remote regions. They flew into the area at first light, the small plane bouncing through turbulence as they crossed mountain ranges and endless forests blanketed in snow. They landed on a frozen lake 2 miles from Marty's trapline hut, the skis of the plane carving long tracks across the ice. The wind howled across the frozen surface, and the cold bit through their heavy gear like razors, stinging exposed skin and making their eyes water. As they snowshoed toward the cabin, an eerie feeling settled over the group. These were men who'd spent their lives in the wilderness, who knew its rhythms and sounds intimately. And something was wrong. The forest was too quiet. No ravens calling to each other from the treetops. No wind rustling through the pines. No distant sounds of animals moving through the underbrush. Just suffocating silence that made every footstep sound like thunder. Every breath seemed too loud in the still air. It was the kind of quiet that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, that triggers some ancient survival instinct deep in your brain. When the hut finally appeared through the trees, something felt off immediately. No smoke rose from the chimney, and in temperatures this cold, that was a death sentence. Marty's snowmobile sat outside, half buried in fresh powder, untouched for days. Snow had drifted against it in patterns that told the experienced eyes of the rescuers that it hadn't moved in at least a week. His sled dogs, always barking and excited when people approached, were nowhere to be seen. The silence was absolute and deeply unsettling. One of the trappers called out, his voice cracking slightly in the cold air. "Marty, you in there?" Nothing. Not even an echo. The sound seemed to be swallowed by the snow and trees. They approached slowly, their breath forming thick clouds in the frozen air that hung motionless before dissipating. The door was slightly ajar. Strange because Marty never left his door open. Every trapper knew that an open door was an invitation to predators, to the cold, to death itself. It was one of those unbreakable rules of wilderness survival. The lead trapper reached for the handle, his gloved hand trembling slightly. Not from cold. These men were used to temperatures far below zero. From something else. Something primal. That same instinct that had made the forest feel wrong was screaming at him now, telling him that whatever was behind that door had changed everything. The door creaked open, the hinges stiff from the cold, the sound cutting through the silence like a knife. What they found inside stopped them cold. The cabin was dim, lit only by pale light filtering through frost-covered windows that turned everything into ghostly shadows. Everything was in its place, with an almost eerie precision. Marty's traps hung neatly on the wall, organized by size and type. His rifle stood in the corner, clean and well-maintained. His coffee mug sat on the table, still half full of frozen liquid. But the stove was cold, completely dead. The fire had been out for days, maybe longer. The temperature inside the cabin was barely warmer than outside. And there, in the back corner, they saw him. Marty Meierotto, one of the toughest men in Alaska, a legend among trappers and mountain men, sat slumped against the wall, his face buried in his hands. He wasn't injured. There was no blood, no signs of a bear attack or accident. He wasn't sick. No fever, no visible symptoms of hypothermia or frostbite. But he looked broken in a way that had nothing to do with physical wounds. It was the kind of brokenness that comes from somewhere deeper, from a place where the strongest walls we build around ourselves finally crumble. Cradled in his lap, wrapped carefully in his favorite wool blanket, the one he'd carried on every trapping expedition for the past decade, was Scout, his loyal companion, his best friend, his survival partner for 8 years.